Welcome to the Brighthood seminar. It's arranged and hosted by Netclean, and this is actually the 6th year that they're arranging this conference. And you out there, you're more than 600 people, and that's a great audience. We're gathered here to listen to some of the world's, and I actually do mean the world, I'll explain to you later why, the world's most interesting speakers in the field of child sex abuse. We are proud to present the Swedish Queen, Amina Muhammad from the United Nations in New York, Sanjay Poonen, who is COO of one of the biggest software companies in the world. We'll meet Hans Westberry, CEO of Verizon, and also the legendary Homeland Security Special Agent. Just listen to that title, Homeland Security Special Agent Jim Cole. He will join us later on. And then we will also meet one of the investigative journalists from New York Times and many, many others. We'll get introduced to new research and to new technology. And the schedule is planned for 3 hours sharp with 2 breaks in order for you to rest your legs a little bit, stretch your legs. And the whole seminar will be filmed, taped, so you can go back to it later. We also have a panel here, and who will sit with us throughout the day. We have Björn Sällström in the middle. He's detective superintendent, and he has worked with Interpol, and is now senior advisor at the National Police Force. And I would say that he's the most experienced person within law enforcement that you can find in the northern part of Europe. And then we have Linda Jonsson, PhD in child psychiatry and lecturer in social work. And Linda, her research has contributed to new stricter legislation where digital rapists are equalized with physical ones, a legislation in Sweden that has attracted a lot of international attention. And last but not least, Anna Boyström, our host. You're the CEO of Netclean, and she will be the host and the hostess and the collective force across this seminar. So again, warmly welcome. Our first speaker then. Many queens engage in charity, but Queen Sylvia has taken on the plight to speak out with profound knowledge for those millions of children around the world that are victims of the most appalling crime of all time, child sexual abuse. She's today one of the world's authorities on this subject. We're proud to welcome Her Royal Highness, the Queen Sylvia, as our first keynote speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, connectivity plays a crucial role in our lives, especially now in the COVID-19 era. For the connected, it brings education and entertainment. It allows families and friends to stay in touch, just like His Majesty and I stay in touch with our children and grandchildren when visits and family dinners must wait. However, in a connected world where both children and adults live as much online as offline, we must make sure that every child is safe. It is for this purpose, ladies and gentlemen, that we are here today. And I'm honored to have this opportunity to speak to you. 21 years ago, I founded World Childhood Foundation to help fight sexual violence against children. Already then, the internet was used to exploit children. And I asked, how can we turn this around? How can technology be used for good and to fight these terrible crimes? In 2003, Childhood invested in Netclean. Their solution detects child sexual abuse material on work, computers, and now also on mobile phones and tablets. But look where we are today. The COVID-19 crisis has resulted in a surge in online distribution of child sexual abuse material, which was already at high levels prior to the pandemic. In many countries, Schools and other support services have been closed down. Both children and adults have been confined to their homes, spending much more time online. And this puts children at an increased risk of sexual exploitation both online and offline. The need for efficient solutions to tackle these crimes and to eliminate child sexual abuse material from the internet has never been greater. And that is why World Childhood Foundation is leading the work on making the internet safer for children. We do that in the UN Broadband Commission, where they work together with partners like ITU, UNICEF, WHO, and the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children. And that is why His Majesty and I convened a round table of experts on artificial intelligence and child sexual abuse to explore how technology can be used as a catalyst for child safety online. I'm proud to say that while we have still far to go, we have made great progress. When I started the World Childhood Foundation more than 20 years ago, it was not easy to talk about child sexual abuse and violence against children. But today, we have a framework that puts light on the issue and makes it easier to take action. And this framework is the United Nations Agenda 2030, with its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which aim to build a better world. One of the goals, Goal 16.2, particularly addresses child sexual abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, children have the right to a childhood free from violence, abuse, and exploitation. And it is our collective responsibility to make sure that right is fulfilled and protected at home, in our communities, in our schools, and in the corporate world. But now, with only 10 years to go until the deadline for the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to intensify our efforts. And this is why the Brighthood Conference is so important, bringing together relevant stakeholders and focusing on concrete, innovative solutions to fight child sexual abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for participating today. Your presence is a sign of your commitment to this important cause. And now, please, let us make the most of this opportunity. Let us use what we learned today to ensure a brighter future, free from violence and abuse for all children. Thank you.
And thank you, Queen Sylvia, for participating today. A forceful start. Next person is also a very forceful lady, and she actually knows Queen Sylvia because they have met very many times in these kind of conferences and speeches. And that is Amina Muhammad. She's Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. She's also chair of the UN Sustainable Group. And prior to that, she was Minister of Environment in her homeland, Nigeria. So let's welcome Amina Muhammad.
It's a pleasure to greet the Brighthood Conference. The United Nations continues to believe it is essential to galvanize the international community and drive national action to better protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation. From the Convention on the Rights of the Child to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the organization has sought to advocate and support countries to build a world of dignity, opportunity, and equality for every child. In Target 16.2 of the Sustainable Development Goals, the international community has committed to end all forms of violence against children, including sexual abuse and exploitation by 2030. While we have seen some progress, we still face huge hurdles, many of which have been rising in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. There is growing alarm that the accelerating scale, severity, and the complexity of online child sexual abuse and exploitation will undermine progress not only on Target 16.2, but also across all the targets related to child well-being in the SDGs. The digital era has enabled unprecedented opportunities to realize children's rights, but it has also magnified children's exposure to risks and harm. COVID-19 containment measures may have heightened the danger of sexual exploitation and abuse, while making that much harder to protect children. Victims of sexual violence facing debilitating harm and carrying deep scars, children whose abuse is captured on camera, also face the horror of having their suffering preserved online, seemingly in perpetuity. Now is the time to intensify our work to prevent and end this violence. Governments must lead working with communities and civil society. With the right laws, systems, policies and investments, as well as adequate monitoring and evaluation, and robust public education and campaigning, significant and sustained reductions in violence can be achieved. New partnership between governments and technology companies are crucial to address the digital dimensions. Technological solutions have become more sophisticated, but continued innovation is essential to address known and emerging threats. There are increasing examples of strong cooperation between law enforcement, technology companies, and civil society organizations, including through the We Protect Global Alliance and the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children. UNICEF and other UN entities collaborate closely in these global initiatives and support national efforts. To track national progress, the Economist Intelligence Unit, Out of the Shadows benchmarking index is innovative. Supported by Childhood, the 60-country index examines how countries are responding to the threat of sexual violence against children and highlights areas for advancement against the Sustainable Development Goals and our commitment to end abuse, exploitation, trafficking, violence and torture against children. The United Nations Secretary-General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation, launched in June, provides a vision and a set of actions for the global community to connect, respect, and protect people in the digital age. We will count on the Brighthood Conference to continue to serve as a valuable platform for knowledge sharing and other steps we need to take. We look forward to working with all partners to ensure that every child can live a life free from sexual abuse and exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina Muhammad, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, and also the chair of the UN Sustainable Group. This conference is going to be focusing a lot on that. We will have live on stage our host, Boyce, CEO of Netclean. Or you want me to sit there with you? No, bet you come up here. Yeah. So, Anna, our first speaker was Queen Sylvia. It's not every day she appears in events arranged by private companies. How come?
Well, as you heard, Queen Sylvia and the World Childhood Foundation, they invested in Netclean early, and we are very proud of having the support from Queen Sylvia herself and the whole World Childhood Foundation. And I think that it's amazing that already back in 2003, Queen Sylvia understood that technology is important and able to stop child sexual abuse. And yeah, we are very grateful for having her as a big
But she
supporter.
was visiting your office, wasn't she,
Yeah.
in Gothenburg?
Yeah, she was. And we invited her to Gothenburg, to our office, and she stayed for a couple of hours, and we had the opportunity to introduce the whole Netclean team and to walk through the office space and also to present the impact that our customers are doing with help of our technology. And we had a really good time, and yeah. Good. It's amazing.
Two fantastic ladies, these two. When I mean, Netclean is a software company. Exactly what do you provide?
So we are developing technologies to protect companies' IT environment, computers and servers and mobile devices. But we also share the knowledge that we have gained over the years. We do that on two platforms, the Brighthood Conference being one platform, And the Netclean report, a yearly report on the child sexual abuse crime, is another platform.
But just to stop there for a while, I mean, if I'm an employee in a private company that has implemented your software, and I start surfing and finding these kind of pictures, what happens?
So it's not just surfing. I mean, you can bring in these images and use the computers in other ways as well. I mean, on the darknet or with help of external devices, etc. So what happens is that the computer is generating an alarm that is sent to a central management server that is hosted by the company itself.
And you can track the exact user.
And the company can then see which computer was used to consume this material, and then they can take necessary precautions, and depending on which policies they have in place.
Who are your customers?
Well, we do have large employees, large companies in Sweden, very well-known brands. To name a few, I can say that we have Ericsson, we have Telia, we have Tele2, we have banks and finance institutes, and also mining companies like Boliden, for example. So it's different, but I would say that the common denominator of all our customers is that they are leading with values, and they implement our solutions in order to. It's a hygiene factor for them.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I guess that being connected to children's sexual abuse is something you don't want to be. I mean, that might hurt your brand. So, I mean, now you mentioned some names. Are these companies using your software? Are they open to tell that this is actually something that we use, because it might be a problem also within our house?
Yes or no. I mean, the companies I mentioned are on our website, but it's hard for us to get companies to actually talk about that they are using our software, because they don't want to be associated with child sexual abuse. Independent on whether they are doing good things or not, they don't want to be associated to that.
Of course not.
But I think it's important that we start to talk about it, because even if you don't talk about it, it exists, and it exists in any company.
This we have been talking about already in this beginning of the conference, talking about the UN Sustainable Goals. There are 17, and this specific one is the 16.2, the goal focusing on violence against children, that's applicable to us. Why have you decided to tie this conference to these goals?
It's easy for us to lean towards the 16.2 goal, because we are so connected to what the private sector is doing in order to combat child sexual abuse. And we want to showcase a positive initiative and solutions to the world. And therefore, we sort of tied the Brighthood Conference toward goal 16.2.
Tack, Anna. We'll come back to you.
Thank you.
And now we will turn to the UK, where we will meet with Susie Hargreaves. She's Chief Executive of the IWF, which stands for Internet Watch Foundation. And Susie, are you there? See if you're connected.
I'm here. Hello.
Oh, good. Fine. Hi. Welcome. There you are. Are you working from home?
Thank you very much.
Are you working from home?
Yes, I am working from. I am working from home half the week, and half the week I'm in the office. Yes. So thank you very much.
You have prepared a speech for us, and afterwards we'll communicate a little bit with some questions from my part. But please, your stage is yours, if you can say that in this internet times.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It's a real privilege and an honour, particularly to acknowledge the good work of Netclean, who are members of ours, but also to acknowledge the work of all the other speakers, and particularly to thank Queen Sylvia for taking such an inspirational lead in this matter. I'd like to show my presentation now. I don't think I'm allowed to share at the moment, so could you just check if I can share my screen, please?
Isn't she showing itself?
Yeah, unfortunately it's coming up as you disabled the screen sharing, so in order for me to share my screen.
While we find your presentation here.
Oh, okay, thank you.
There it comes.
Is it coming?
Okay.
Apologies to everyone.
Yeah. But Susie, tell us a little bit shortly about just the IWF. How was it founded?
Okay, so the IWF has been going for 24 years in the UK. We were founded by the internet industry who wanted to get together to fight online child sexual abuse. We were started by 7 companies and we now have 155 companies based around the world. So we're the UK hotline for reporting and removing online child sexual abuse, but we also have 42 reporting portals around the world. And this enables citizens around the world to report suspected child sexual abuse anonymously.
That's now that I think you will now. We have found your presentation now, so you'll come back. I think some of you will tell us about this global collaboration that you are organizing. So please, Susan, now here is your presentation.
Thank you.
It's a what?
Aha, here we go. Thank you. Yeah, it's working. Thank you very much.
There we go.
Okay, let's go. See, it's coming up. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, so great. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, so the IWF, we're not for profit organization. As I said, we have been going for 24 years. These are some of the partners that we work with around the world because online child sexual abuse and the removal of it depends on us working closely in partnership. So we're an NGO and independent of government and law enforcement, but we work very closely with both. We're also a member of the UK Safer Internet Centre with ChildNet International and SWGFL, and they provide helplines and awareness raising in schools and universities and colleges and for children. And we're a founder member of InHope, the International Association of Hotlines. These are some of our members, well, a majority of our members, and as you can see, as well as Netclean in there, we also have some of the biggest companies in the world. And as I said, we have 42 reporting portals around the world as well. So I really wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for inviting me today, but to give you a sense of the scale of the issue that we're all trying to work together to fight. And in 2019, we assessed a web page every 2 minutes, and every 4 minutes, we found a child being sexually abused. We processed over 260,000 reports, and that was a 14% increase on 2018. And of those 260,000 reports, 132,730 web pages showed images and videos of children being sexually abused. So that was an increase of 26% on 2018. And bear in mind that every single web page could have 1 or 100 or even thousands of images. So we're talking about millions of images. And sadly, those numbers have gone up every single year. And in fact, it's set to be more this year as well. To give you a sense of what we're talking about, in the UK, we categorise the images A, B and C according to UK sentencing law, with category A being the very worst, showing rape and sexual torture, and category C being the least bad, but really still pretty terrible. And if you look at 2019, 40% was category A and B. So that's really serious sexual abuse. In terms of the age and sex of the victims that we see, in 2019, 92% of all the children we saw were girls, and that tends to be the pattern throughout. And in fact, it's gone up slightly because of self-generated content, which I'll talk about in a second. And when you look at the age, that you actually see that, over 50% was of children aged under 10. One of the most shocking statistics is that the youngest suffer the most serious type of abuse. So we analysed 471,000 hashes that we have, and a hash is a digital fingerprint of a known image of child sexual abuse. And I'll talk a little later about our hash list and how we use it. But when we analysed those hashes, over 87% showed that children aged 2 and under suffered the most severe form of abuse. And when you look at that as children aged under 10, 64% show the highest level of abuse. And, you know, it's really shocking when you think that we're talking often about newborns. I was asked to talk about where we find the content. So just to clarify that when we're talking about child sexual abuse, you could have the content produced in one country, the internet company that's hosting it in another country, and of course, people looking at it from all over the world. And we always say the best way to get rid of child sexual abuse is to remove it at source. So actually remove it from the internet. Now, if you look at 2019, of those 132,000 web pages, 71% were hosted in the Netherlands. That's over 93,000. And in fact, over 90% were hosted in the EU area. I mean, this is for a number of reasons, that's where internet companies are based, so they tend to host stuff, but there are a number of bad players, particularly in the Netherlands. When you compare that to the UK record, which is something we're very proud of, when we started, 18% of known child sexual abuse was hosted in the UK, and it's been down less than 1% since 2003. And in 2019, we hosted 0.1%. You compare that to the Netherlands, that's quite a staggering statistic. And generally, we have that content removed in under 2 hours. And we're able to do that because we have a zero tolerance approach to hosting in the UK. And we would say that every country needs to remove the content as soon as possible, because for every minute it stays live, it means that that child and that image is subject to the re-victimization when people look at that image. And I should also give one caveat to say all our statistics are based on what we find. We're often asked where this content hosted, what type of platforms, and people probably be quite surprised to see it's very low in terms of social networking, in terms of the content we remove, and that we actually find about 84% on image hosting boards. One of the things the IWF's able to do is we're able to not just take public reports, but we can proactively go out and search for this content as well. I wanted to really talk about self-generated content because this is a rising trend, and a really shocking rising trend that we've seen. Over a number of years, we've been funded by Microsoft to research self-generated content. And we use the Luxembourg Guidelines definition of self-generated content, which is material involving children in sexual images produced by children depicting themselves. And these images may be more or less sexualized and may be produced entirely freely or as a result of coercion. So what that actually means for us in terms of what we see is that we're not talking about a selfie taken on a telephone by a child and shared with another child. What we're talking about almost exclusively is children in bedrooms and domestic settings on a webcam with internet connection who are actually being coerced and tricked into sharing videos and performing sexual acts, which are then captured and shared elsewhere. In 2019, 29% of what we removed, excuse me, was self-generated. And of this, 76% of the girls were aged 11 to 13. Excuse me. This is a really shocking statistic. And unfortunately, it's risen during COVID. So during COVID, we had strict lockdown in the UK, but we have seen a massive rise in reports. So the police statistics prior to COVID was that at any one time in the UK, there were 100,000 perpetrators looking at child sexual abuse. And since COVID, they've upped that to 300,000 in the UK alone. And this slide shows that, excuse me, this slide shows that we've had a massive increase in reports during the period. And during a month of COVID, we had 8.8 million attempts of people in the UK alone to access our URL list. And sadly, 44% of all content we've removed to date this year has been classed as self-generated. I'm just going to finish off by talking about our services. So one of those things we do, and it was nice to hear Anna talk about the relationship with industry, is we provide a range of technical services to industry to help them disrupt and ensure that child sexual abuse is removed. The most well-known of these is our URL list, our blocking list, which goes out across the world. Google and Microsoft deploy it globally. And this typically has a number of between 5,000 and more URLs on it every single day. I just see listed there a number of our services, but I'm actually going to focus on 3. So I'll just take to the next list. So the URL list, which is the blocking list, has between 5,000 and 10,000 daily URLs on it every day. And that's cleaned twice a day. So it's a highly dynamic, flexible list. And in the UK, if you attempt to look at anything on our URL list, and this is for content not hosted in the UK, you get a splash page which tells you what you've been doing, that you've been attempting to access illegal content, and that it could result in prosecution. And it also tells you where to go to get help, which is to stop it now. We also have, as I mentioned before, an image hash list. So we currently have 550,000 unique hashes, so digital fingerprints of known images of child sexual abuse. And the most popular hashing technology, one of the tools we use, is PhotoDNA. And this means we can go out using our crawlers to search the internet for matches so we can get those removed. And we have developed a number of crawlers which we use. We are deploying our crawlers in a highly targeted way. It's like a spider, it goes out and finds potential child sexual abuse, brings it back to us where we assess it, and if it's child sexual abuse, we take measures to get it removed. In 2019, our crawler crawled 72 million web pages and 2/3 of a billion images. Linked to the hash list and the crawler, we are now using classifiers as well, because the volumes are so huge, we're trying to identify potential child sexual abuse before our analysts look at it to try and triage it in some way. And we also currently have about 5,300 keywords, which are specialist terms that people interested in child sexual abuse use to try and find it. And our keywords are deployed across search engines and other services to block people searching for this content. One of the things I wanted to say was that all images and videos that we take action on have to have human assessment. Despite using technology in the best way we can, in order to quality assure everything, we have to have human assessment. Now, the only way that changes is if we have 100% match on our hash list. We're able to remove that because that has already been previously assessed by one of our analysts. Excuse me. So how do we care for our people? Well, in this field, looking after your staff is essential. So we have a very careful recruitment process, which includes a counsellor. We used to do away days. We don't at the moment because we're all working in different places. Also, our office has remained open throughout lockdown. Then we give them a shorter working day. It's a nice outdoor environment. All analysts and people working on our hotline have mandatory monthly counselling. They can also have additional counselling as and when they need it. And we also offer that when they leave the organisation as well. And they also ensure that no one works from home, no one has alone working if they're working with criminal images. And every single member of staff, from me down, that sees images has an annual assessment with a psychologist. So I hope that's given you a good sense of the scale of the issue. I just want to finish by saying partnership is everything, global and national, and actually conferences like this are so important because we are all committed to the same objective, and we all fundamentally want to work together to remove this terrible content so that we can give the children in those images some hope. So thank you for the honour of speaking to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. I mean, I was impressed by your statistics. I mean, the way of collecting data like you do and spreading the data, I mean, that's the only way to combat things is to start measuring them if they grow bigger or increasing or decreasing. So that was impressive. Tell me, when you handle the pictures, you take them down. How many? I mean, many of these pictures appear very, very many times. The very same picture comes up and up and up and again. How do you handle that, and how do you count it?
Well, thank you very much. So, as I said, prior to the creation of the hashing technology, it was incredibly difficult to remove all the images, and we can't guarantee now that we can remove people's images forever. But we can do our best, because if we find a unique image, as in no one's seen this before, it immediately goes onto our hash list, which we share with industry. So industry can ensure it's not uploaded onto their platforms. And we can also use with our crawlers to find matches and bring them back. I have to say we don't count the number of times that the images come back, because it's just we're not sure that that's a hugely meaningful thing to do. But actually, what we do is make sure that if we get an immediate match, it automatically gets removed. So doesn't mean that people won't repost it. So, you know, it's a constant battle. It's kind of war of attrition and whack-a-mole to make sure that we do get these images taken down. But I do think, from talking to some survivors, the fact that that technology now exists gives them a huge amount of hope, because in the past it was once your image was out there, it was out there. And I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore, although we've got a huge amount to do.
Can you elaborate a little bit how you apply machine learning and what good does it make?
Thank you. Yes, so like everybody, we're looking at how we apply machine learning. So that would be definitely within our classifiers. So an example is that, you know, every time the classifiers have more source material to learn from, they get better and better and better at recognizing potential child sexual abuse. And I think, you know, we're not alone in that. It's very much in a, you know, work in progress, innovation. It's still stuff that just sort of helps us, points us in the right direction. But, you know, as it develops, it's going to be so useful. I mean, one of the biggest challenges for us, and I'm sure it will be for the majority of people talking today, is age verifying the victims in the images. So it's not difficult when they're under 10 or, you know, little children, but it's incredibly difficult to accurately verify if someone is 15, 16 or 17. So the more we can use machine learning to learn about age and learn about, you know, those potential images, the better it's going to be for us all. So it's going to be a real deal, you know, it's going to be fantastic, and it's going to change the scenario for us.
Susie, could you briefly also, I mean, you presented these figures of hosting images, and you said that you could show that UK, and you have done admirable work there, while Holland, for example, is a big host of this kind of imagery. What does it take? I mean, what is the explanation? Is it a different legislation, or is it a different focus in the UK, or how come?
Well, that is a great question, because whilst internationally we all have pretty much child sexual abuse is illegal across the board, the way we deal with it is subtly different in every country, and legislation is really key to this. Legislation and law enforcement response. And I am not saying, I'll just be absolutely clear, I'm not saying we don't have a problem with people looking at child sexual abuse. So there's a demand issue within the UK. And particularly, according to police, particularly in live streaming at the moment. But the actual hosting, we have really got that sorted. And one of the reasons we're able to do that is we don't have to go to court to get a court order to take content down. We are able to issue a notice and take down to the UK hoster to remove that content. They do it under a set of conditions, so they retain the evidence. And we do that with the police and government support. Now, in other countries, you do have to go to court. So I think, the Netherlands, to give them their credit, they are really stepping up to this. They're attempting to sort it out. They have an excellent hotline. We've met with many law enforcement and senior politicians to talk about it. They have got legislative and law enforcement challenges. And to be fair to them, they have a number of very bad players. They have a number of bulletproof hosters who are really bad in this space. So it's not the responsible companies that they're trying to get to take action. It's some very irresponsible ones. So that, for me, that doesn't mean it's okay to leave it up. And actually, it's got to be resolved, which is why we all trying to work together with the Netherlands to give what support we can. But they need to get to a point where they are as hostile a territory as the UK and some other countries around the world.
Thank you so much, Susie Hargreaves. It was extremely interesting to listen to you, and I wish you all luck with your important work in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So now we'll turn to our panel. Get all my papers along. Linda and Björn and Anna, you will be a little bit aside right now, because I will start with Björn. How come so much is stored? I mean, what about the storage situation in Sweden? Do we have as good a result as the UK?
We do have some places in Sweden where this kind of material is stored. It's like Susie Hargreaves said, and thank you, Susie, for a very good presentation. It's like she said, some countries have different legislations when it comes to bullet hosting services, for instance, where you can put basically any kind of illegal material, and it's fairly hard for the legislation to address it.
But does it make a difference, or does it pop up somewhere else as soon as you close somewhere?
Yeah, I think it's super important that we work on remove content from URLs or web pages or wherever they are stored. Absolutely, but the material is out there, and every image is about a physical abuse of a child. So even though you take away the images, which are absolutely crucial because the re-victimization, we should never forget that remove the picture doesn't remove the problems with the physical abuses. So I guess, and people who have this sexual interest in children, they will always find ways to store it somewhere. So and that's why the collaboration with software companies and tech industries and everyone who knows about these tech issues to find solutions to remove it.
Do you have a figure? How many people out there are interested in using children in a sexual way?
I guess Linda is more. It's better to answer that question. But as far as I understand and heard from different kind of reports, something that like between 1% and 3% of a male population have a sexual interest in children.
1% to 3% of the male population, and that is global.
Yes, as far as I understand, yes.
Linda, Susie talked about the hotline, and you can really press a red button in order on internet in order to report what's happening. Is that a way that you normally get this kind of information from children that are abused?
No, hotlines are not targeted at like communication with children. So children has to disclose somewhere else. And at the moment, we know that children that are victims in this way and were documented sexual abuse, that they seldom talk, especially not to professionals. So, and that's of course a problem. So maybe they can they tell a friend or hopefully like a grown-up, a parent or something. But also we have cases, of course, where police find chat logs, pictures and so on. So the case is revealed through that. And that's a bit problematic for the child also, because they have not chosen their disclosure time. It's actually the police who says, or someone says, here are the pictures of you or the chat logs. And of course, this is very, very important that they are identified. That's 100% important. But also we have to bear in mind that the child's perspective is to also have a pace with them during the disclosure process. But then also they can, of course, disclose in a more therapeutic situation, or if they have psychological problems and so on, and then they reveal that. And that could could be a way in of talking about online sexual abuse.
Could you explain to us a little bit of the psychological pressure on the child not to disclose?
There are so many circumstances around these types of abuse, and especially when it comes to self-produced images. There's so much shame and guilt related to this, also because you have actually produced the material yourself. So the children feel that it's their fault, and that, of course, affects the disclosure part. But also the fact that there are these images, that they are so afraid of someone finding them. So if you go to school, have someone see my pictures, when I apply for a job in the future. So that's why we need to work with the children to just normalize this, that someone might see you like during the whole lifespan. And of course, there's so many images, so probably no one would look at the picture of you. But at the same time, and as we have talked about here before, that you can't take all the pictures away. So it's a way of just accepting that these images are there.
So a child who becomes adult will always live with this knowledge that the pictures might appear in any situation in life.
Oh, yes.
And how do you deal with it?
No, of course, I think it's a way of accepting the situation, and there are other life circumstances where you work more therapeutically with the same thing, that if people around you die or whatever, you have to accept the situation.
But you have, sir, I mean, you have ways of helping the youngsters to learn to live with it.
And
How?
that's a problem today, because we don't have evaluated support of treating methods for identified victims. We really need to shape up here and start doing research and structure the way these children need support. This is there's a big call for this.
You sit with a child or with a youngster and you say, tell me, what is your worst
fear?
Fear, and then what happens then?
Yeah, and of course then the child can say, so I'm not a therapist, but I suppose that if you talk to a child and say, what is your biggest fear? That someone will see it. Okay, what will happen if someone sees it? And of course the imagination of someone always, like if you go into a room and always feel, oh, everyone have seen me. Of course, that's not statistically, that's not what will happen. But so you just have to imply that in the mind, that this is my life, and probably not many will look at the pictures, but some might have.
Björn, how easily accessible are these pictures? Do you need to be a data specialist in order to find them?
No, unfortunately not. It's very easy accessible, even though you cannot Google it. But it's fairly easy to find it anyway. And if you don't know where to find it, you can always find ways to find it, so to speak. And it's the same with people who have a sexual interest in children, as it is with all of us. Some of them are super technical skilled, and some of them are not. And unfortunately today it's the technology of producing pictures, posting pictures, the encryption, to anonymize yourself. It's fairly easy today, so and that's of course is a big problem for law enforcement.
So there is something called police to peer. What is that?
Well, Police to Peer is a Europol-founded project, and it was created by Norway, where a dear colleague of mine, Bjørn Erik Ludvigsen, who created it a couple of years ago. And what it does basically is that you create a file, a video file, with a non-content. For instance, a police officer who talks about this kind of behavior and bad content, and then you name this video file and this file with a name that appeals to people with sexual interest in children. For instance, my daughter at 5. And then you put this file on a file sharing site, and when someone look for this picture or this file named my daughter at 5, and the person downloads it and opens it, and there you find a police officer saying, okay, you have downloaded a file, and now we have your IP address, and we can trace you, and we can share this information with law enforcement around the world.
That's beautiful.
It's fantastic.
So the policeman in full uniform just pops up in your computer and tells them, we can track you.
Yes, exactly. And it's an amazing, amazing thing, and it's a great project, and I'm so proud and happy to be a part of it, and I'm actually one of the police officers out there, and I know that I've been downloaded millions of times from people who have a sexual interest in children. It's very, it's nice.
And do you know that it's efficient, this police to peer? I mean,
it's what?
If it's efficient?
It is, as far as I understand, and they do measure the times that these files are downloaded, and it's like millions and millions of times.
Fantastic.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So now we are up for a break, 10 minutes from now, and then we'll meet again. So we're back from our little break, and we'll continue with the seminar in Brighthood seminar about child sexual abuse. And the coming up guest now is Niklas Rudberg, specialist at Group Sustainable Finance at Nordea. It's the leading Scandinavian bank. And you, actually, what are you doing? I mean, it's a nice title, but what are you doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. But one of my focus areas at the bank right now is to project lead the implementation of United Nations Principles for Responsible Banking. And it's a voluntary initiative. We are a signatory of that, and it helps banks and financial institutions across the globe to align its strategy and business activities towards society's goals, like the SDGs.
But how can, I mean, we're talking about the specific goal here, 16.2, violence against children. How can a bank act?
Yeah, so the first step we do is that we do an impact analysis towards the SDGs, including the sub-targets, so the 110
SDGs,
the Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah. And then we map if we can contribute positively or if we actually have a negative impact towards that specific SDG. And when we look specifically at the 16.2, which we are today, we as a bank, it naturally goes to transactions. Because if you consume this material, you might do a money transfer, or you can actually share, file shares. You get access to other materials like we have had before.
And how can you find that it's just exactly that money transfer? I mean, there are so millions of money transfers.
Yeah, and there's different methods how you also do these payments. We are not specialists ourselves in identifying. We are monitoring very, very many transactions. So therefore, we collaborate with the experts. So the more data we get, the more intelligence we can get. We can then know more specifically where we should look, in which transactions, to which countries. So we are partnering with the Finance Coalition here in Sweden. There's banks, financial institutions, it's run by ECPAT, and also the law enforcement are partnering there. So that is also one of the principles, that we should go out and collaborate to be more precise in our implementation.
But to be very concrete, what kind of payment will be suspicious in your eyes?
So if we get an intelligence that this section, it could, for example, be live streaming material from a specific country. If we get that information, we can start building a scenario. So we can identify if a person is making money transfers, maybe also in range what kind of amount they are sending to that country. So if they do this transaction a couple of times, then it gets us a suspicious behavior from our side, and we then let the law enforcement agencies know about that so they can start investigating that a bit more.
So it could, for example, be that you see that there is a payment, it's quite a small one, 100, 200 crowns something, going from Sweden to the Philippines.
Yeah.
Twice or three times a month.
Exactly.
And what kind of conclusion do you draw then?
It becomes we get it monitored. We get an alert that this is according to one of our scenarios, which we do for all money transferring for criminal activity, and we then gather this information and we send it to law enforcement, who then starts the real police investigation. And then they can come back to us and say that this is interesting, we will look more into this, or say that this was a person who sent money home to his family. So
a pair girl or a nurse or a nanny who actually. So,
Exactly.
Yeah. So you have also implemented Netclean, this software, this protecting software in the IT system of Nordea. So why did you do that?
I would say it's multiple reasons why we did that. One is, of course, that we would like to prevent this type of crime happening. So we'd like to do what we can. It's also part of the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's the primary one. But another area why we implemented is that if we have employees that actually consume this material, they might also share the material. We consider them as being a potential security risk. And why we're saying that is because if these networks identify that this person is working at Nordea, it's very likely that they will start blackmailing this person. Maybe not only for money, but for services. So then they have a person inside our company. And we work with money, we work with, transactions, so it's very easy that they become a security risk for us. So that is the second part, and also for the third one, it's would be devastating for us as a brand to be, connected to this type of file sharing behavior. So that would hurt our brand reputation very much. We also do it for protecting our brand and making sure that we do what we can to prevent this from happening.
You heard about somebody, a banking man in Australia, who was, tell me.
Yeah, there was a bank in Australia where they didn't have enough control over the money transfers. And this became a very big scandal. So if I remember correctly, the CEO had to step down and maybe also one of the board members. So it shows that if we're not doing what we can to prevent this, the brand will be severely hurt, but also, people need to take the consequences from our perspective.
The brand is very much a question of pure money. It's really a crucial thing for a bank to have a good brand, of course. Yeah. You talked a little bit. You mentioned this bank coalition. this collaboration between.
Yes, yeah.
Tell me more.
So it's a coalition which we joined many years ago, and from our perspective, we look into transactions, of course, to get more intelligence. Where should we look? Where should we focus our efforts? We get intelligence from law enforcement, the experts. We also discuss between the banks, so we identify what can we learn, how can we refine these scenarios, and that the partnering was many years ago. So one concrete example, which also can be read on the Finance Coalition's homepage, is previously a lot of these transactions was made by credit card, and now we have identified a bit more how they do these transactions, and therefore it's very difficult to pay for this material by card. We're now looking into bank transfers, of course. There can be multiple ways how to do that. But then we also see that a lot of these transactions now start to go via cryptocurrency, and then it becomes very difficult for us to monitor. We cannot monitor that in that sense.
So if you pay by Bitcoin, then you're safe?
At least the banks cannot monitor it. The other government and agencies or the ones providing the Bitcoins need to do the monitoring, because we can only monitor the transactions that we have within our system.
And do you see that the transaction or the flood of transactions is kind of disappearing now from the open banks and into the dark web and Bitcoin?
Yeah, I would say that when the persons consuming this material and doing these transfers, when they realize, and the rumors spread quite fast in these communities, when they realize that we start to identify and connecting the dots, they of course look at other ways of sending money. So yes, it's going more and more to that.
Then you have nothing to do.
It's difficult for us to monitor. We can still monitor what we can within, but we cannot monitor the cryptocurrency that is not in our systems and flow.
But going back to the software that you have installed in your IT environment, have you informed the employees that they actually are under this kind of control?
Yes, we informed by having an article on the intranet that we are starting to monitor this.
Are you obliged to inform?
Yes, we were obliged to inform. It's a new kind of monitoring, so therefore we're also obliged to do it. But,
and you find cases still, people coming up that you find?
It's difficult for us to comment on that one, but of course, if you inform, people are aware that it's happening. But to my knowledge, we have had very few cases. That is very good for us.
Do you feel that you make a difference?
Yes, we do. We first of all, we believe that by doing this monitoring and, aligning our business activities towards society's goals, we can actually help the transition to a more sustainable future, and also we can, help prevent this terrible crime. So yes, we believe we can.
What it hits me when talking to you, and which is interesting, is how concretely a bank actually applies to the UN sustainable goals. You take them very seriously, and you look into how can we implement them in every sector of our activity. That's interesting, because you could say UN. We don't bother.
I think there are approximately 200 banks now being signatory to these principles, and I am also responsible for implementing them within Nordea, but we are also sharing with other banks internationally what we are doing, what kind of metrics that we are using, so we can support this goal. So we are sharing in all the SDGs, including this with other banks, how they can proceed and how they can tackle that question and become, if we can gather as a financial community in this sense, I think that we can really make big change.
That makes me, it makes me feel good that these kind of sustainable goals are for real. Thank you, Niklas Rudberg, Nordea.
Thank you.
So I'll go back to my panel. So Niklas told us, Björn, there is a banking coalition led by ECPAT focusing on child exploitation. What, from your point of view, the policeman, what kind of difference does this coalition make? What can they do?
I think it's super important that we understand that this is a societal problem and not a law enforcement problem. So I think every step, every part of the society takes to prevent this is fantastic. And it also shows that the importance of collaborate between organizations, private sector and law enforcement, for instance. And for us as law enforcement agencies, it's impossible to investigate cases if we don't have intelligence, if we don't have information, in these cases from the banking industry. And since we have problems with the live streaming videos, which are paid by the consumer, so of course we need this kind of intelligence and information to continue with our investigations. So it's crucial
to act. But what I understand, physical payment or some kind of Bitcoin payment as such is not the common way of paying for this kind of picture. The common way to pay is actually to provide pictures yourself, to be a part of the community. Is that right?
Yes. The main part of the producers of child abuse material doesn't produce this material to get money. The difference, though, is the live streaming industry, where you have a lot of poverty in, for instance, the Philippines, and they need to do this to supply our part of the rich world with this kind of material. So we pay for it with money. But in general, when you produce your own child abuse material, you don't do it for money. You do it for getting a higher position in the forums where you share this kind of material. Or
so there is a hierarchy?
Yes, absolutely. It's a
how can you describe the hierarchy? How?
Well, there are some subgroups, primarily on the dark web, and to get access to these groups, you need to provide with own material or material. And if you can prove to the forum that you have access to children of your own, and that you can produce material on these children, you have high ranking in this.
So it's a kind of a ticket.
Yes, it is
to get in.
It is a ticket. It's a way to market yourself in this forum, and basically to become a star in some of these forums.
To become a star within this, isn't that a amazing thing?
Yes.
Well, last question and short. So far, what I've heard is that all this material is kind of produced at home in a domestic environment. Aren't there any big companies, professional companies, in the luxury blocks of Hong Kong or New York or wherever, where professional white-collar businessmen actually create this business?
As far as we understand, as far as I know, no. Of course, a lot of people are doing a lot of money on trafficking in children. but not as much as producing this kind of material to sell it. Of course, crime groups, it depends on how do you define a crime group. But of course, there are groups of people sharing this kind of material and produce it to one another. But it's not like a white-collar kind of crime where you have businessmen making money out of it. No.
Thank you, Björn. We will turn to a very big company. We'll turn to New York and to Hans Westberry, who is CEO of Verizon. He was former the CEO of Ericsson. Hans, are you there? Sorry, I am mixing my papers up. We're going to SKF, which is a Swedish company based in Gothenburg, doing steel, what's it called? And Daniel Taube is to talk to us about how ethics and compliance risks are connected to child protection. And Daniel Taube is Group Ethics and Compliance Officer at SKF.
Hello, I'm Daniel, Ethics and Compliance Officer of SKF Group, and I take care that the ethics and compliance processes, functions and systems are running to support our employees and business partners to feel safe working in and with SKF, to take legal and ethical decisions that stands up for our company values. This includes whistleblowing, data protection, export controls, anti-fraud and anti-corruption, and to investigate suspected violations against the Code of Conduct. I'll start this short presentation by a quote from our CEO. As a global company, we have a global responsibility. SKF was founded 1907 in Sweden, and already 10 years later a truly global company. And today SKF supplies more than 40 industries in 130 countries from more than 100 factories globally. And we develop and manufacture and also remanufacture bearings, seals and lubrication systems and related services and solutions. Being a truly global company, we take it very serious to deeply understand the trends and the drivers that impact or have the potential to impact our future, markets, regions and industries in which we operate. And we do see sustainability as a business enabler, as a prerequisite for a successful future of SKF. And it must be well integrated into our business strategy and operations. We know that the children who are our future workforce will not accept anything else. And we have also decided to fully embrace digitalization, utilizing its power and benefits by embedding technology into our products, automizing our factories, and using it in a way of selling and of working. And we know that using digitalization also comes with a responsibility. So, here you see a representation of SKF over 100 years ago. And today, SKF is a company with more than 40,000 employees over the world. As such, SKF represents the global society. And that means that we will have both the upsides of the global society, such as the advantage of a fantastic diversity and a deep understanding of the local communities, the local markets, the local cultures. But it also means that the downsides of the society are represented in SKF. But we do not need to accept, and we do not accept, that these downsides can go on and grow within our company to make use of our resources, of our employees, for criminal or unethical purposes. And we do have programs and systems in place to detect it and to stop it. Under our sustainability framework, which we call SKF Care, we address our actions to reduce environmental impact, ensure health and safety of our employees, to take social responsibility in the communities where we operate, and to support human rights. As of the Human Rights Impact Assessment, where we and as other responsible companies as signatories of, for example, the Global Compact, identify the so-called salient rights to take extra care of in the value chain, we first try to understand what we're already doing well and what more we can and should do. When it comes to the children, it's been a focus for SKF for several years already. As a main sponsor for Gothia Cup and Meet the World tournaments played around the globe, SKF has supported and enabled thousands of girls and boys for their right to meet, play and doing sports. Supporting with the trainers and local tournaments, running local sports education programs and games. And the world's largest soccer tournament, the Gothia Cup by SKF, has, together with the local tournaments, engaged 4,000 children and 1,700 teams from 80 nations. And this is an example of how SKF works with the upsides of human rights, and specifically the children's rights, to support them to flourish, grow, and live their dreams. It needs not to be said, but our children are obviously our future. It's our future employees, future decision makers, future lawmakers, and future customers. And they need to be supported as well as protected from exploitation and other threats to thrive as human beings. And just as SKF is fully dedicated to fight corruption, bribery, to fight other illegal and unethical aspects of the global society, it is a natural decision to also support the fight against child abuse and exploitation and other crimes related to children. So, the Netclean solution is for us an example of a global responsibility with local impact. We manage the solution as a part of the global compliance operations, and the impact is mainly local in the regions and in the countries where SKF conducts business. For the past 2 years, SKF has supported authorities around the world to identify and report child abuse material using the technology of the Netclean solution. So, by addressing both the upsides and the downsides, we believe that we can have a significant contribution to a brighter future for our children and for SKF. Thanks for listening.
And thank you, Daniel Taube, SKF, you Group Ethics and Compliance Officer, for participating in this seminar. I will turn, and for you who are newcomers, I'll just remind that Björn Sällström in our panel, he is a police who has been working against child sexual abuse for the last 15, 16 years. He has been working with Interpol and now with the National Police Force. So, Björn, how do you consider, I mean, Daniel talked about detection. How do you consider, how do you estimate this SKF initiative for detection? How important and how does it work?
I think it's super important, and it's a great asset for us as law enforcement agencies, and especially for the kids, that companies implementing this kind of detection systems in their intranets. And the reason for it is we know for a fact that 1 to 3% of the May population have a sexually interested in children, and these people are working some places, right? So unfortunately, we need to be monitored. And unfortunately, we know that people are using their company computers addressing this kind of material. And we know for a fact that even though the alarms of these systems maybe you have an alarm of 1 or 2 or 3 images, after reporting this and after doing the house search, we will find thousands or millions of pictures and images. And it has also happens that we have found ongoing sexual abuses on children that we could prevent. So it's super important that we have this.
The entrance, I mean, SKF then provides an entrance into all this.
Absolutely, and I think it's also crucial to understand that if you don't work on this on a corporate level, or like, sweep it under the carpet. You just put away the problems to somewhere else. So if you address it and acknowledge that this is a problem, address it and let us find the kids.
More specifically, what kind of information is important to get from a company like SKF?
Well, the first thing...
When can you act?
Yes, and what happens when they have this alarm on this detection system is that the team where I work at the National Operation Department are looking at each alarm, at each picture to actually see that, okay, this is child abuse material. And after that, we recommend that the company is doing a police report. And after doing the police report, we have a prosecutor, and the prosecutor let us do the house search, and then we move on.
Okay.
So by taking these steps, the companies can save children from being abused. And here we have it again. We need to understand that there's a very, very intimate and close connection between, of course, the images and the physically abused. So if there's one good thing you can say about child abuse material is that it's very good evidence of crimes. Because when we do find the kids or the perpetrator, we can actually say, hey, it's you on the picture.
Thank you, Björn. We'll move on. And now it's time for Hans Westberry, who is the CEO of Verizon, a big high-tech company, a global one, based in New York. And before, Hans was the CEO of Ericsson. Hans, are you there? Yes, you are.
I'm here. Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi. What time is it where you are?
I think it's 8:30.
8:30.
So it's a little bit in the morning, but it's absolutely okay.
Early bird. You've been engaged in the fight against sexual exploitation of children for quite a long time. Actually, as far as I understand, it started when you were the CEO of Ericsson. How did it come about? How did it start?
I think it started in conversations with Netclean, actually. I think it's 10 years ago. I cannot even remember. Probably longer ago. And we decided to implement the Netclean software across the entire Ericsson footprint. And as you know, Ericsson have employees in 180 countries. So it was a very dedicated process, country by country, because there are different laws and rules and how you do it. But we did that over years, and together with our legal department, we took country by country. That's how we started. And then, of course, I've been engaged in the UN for many years. I'm in the board of the UN Foundation, and I have been in the board of the Childhood for quite a while. I just left that board. So, I've been part of that. And it's pretty simple. I mean, I've been in technology all my life. I see all the upsides of technology. I see that's one of the few ways we can bridge the gap of inequality in the world. But I also realize that there are challenges with technology, and we need to work with that side as well, as our fellow colleague from SKF said. We need to work both with the bad side of digitalization. Clearly, we also need to take advantage of all the positive we can do from technology.
We just had, as our first keynote speaker, we had Queen Sylvia as chairman of the Childhood Foundation.
Yeah.
But Hans, when you first then implemented the software at Ericsson and you got the first result, what was your reaction?
I think we're always equally surprised when you find this type of content, and people have been abusing the system and actually abusing children. I mean, I think that we all feel equally bad about that, and so I think it's just feel really bad. But it's the right thing to do in order to see that you start with yourself first. And I think that's how we felt at Ericsson at that time. Before you talk about everybody else doing something, start with yourself. And that's where we started at Ericsson to implement Netclean.
There might be a conflict here. There are authorities, institutions, police, legislation who are actually in charge to be responsible of this kind of stopping this kind of crime. And then there are the private companies with different. I mean, you are profit. That's your main driver, and you have stockholders, and you need to take care of your brand and so on. How do you think about the responsibility of the private sector?
No, it's huge. I mean, first of all, I mean, Verizon is, I guess, one of the 20 largest companies in the world. Our responsibility and our voice is stronger than government sometimes. So, of course, to see that you're taking the right side in things that is part of your strategy, that's so important. And children inequalities are part of our core values on the company, and then you make it part of it. So we have had for quite a long time, sort of in our strategies, 4 stakeholders. We have our shareholders, we have our customers, we have our employees, and then we have our society. And all of them are actually equally important, because if you start compromising on one of them, you're going to have problems with the others over time. So it's not like one is more important. You just need to manage all of them, especially I would say in large corporation like ours that has such an impact. And that's why we work a lot with digital inclusion, with both the positive side and the negative side. But it's also part of our strategy, because we build more broadband and wireless technology than anybody else basically in the world. So that becomes very normal for us. And I think that we have seen during the last 10, 15 years, private sector actually being much more part of the society and taking the responsibility. We can always do more, and we should do more. But clearly we are on a path where we see corporation taking much more responsibility. Then, as you say, you know, it's also a collaboration with the private and public. Many of the largest challenges we have on this earth cannot be one-sided solved. All of them are basically in between public and private. So that's why it becomes so important to have this collaboration with UN, with other organizations that we work with. I mean, we, for example, when it comes to child abuse, we work with the NECMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. That's how we work with them to get the right inputs and what they know. So I think that's how it's actually evolving for many of the corporations.
Very brief, but could you give us some very concrete examples how you work in order? I mean, you're into connectivity, and connectivity is the core of this entire business. Child sexual abuse. How do you work? Some examples.
So first you need to understand how we're set up. We have Verizon Consumer Group, which is basically wireless business and fixed broadband to customers, where we have content on top of it, and then our business group. Then we have Verizon Media Group, which is of course all the Yahoo brands that we own as well. So very much on the Yahoo brands, we work very closely with the NECMEC. We have photo DNA in our system to detect all types of child abuse material coming there that is known. But we also have our own sort of team of employees that are investigating and reviewing all material that we see, and of course report both to NECMEC but also to the authorities. And finally, we have our in-house investigators that constantly is investigating what's happening internally as well. So we have a broad set of people working with this daily, given how much content is passing, especially on the Verizon Media Group, where we have all the Yahoo assets.
You were involved in the process when the UN adopted the 17 goals of sustainability, and you pleaded for one more goal, number 18. Tell us the background and tell us why.
Yeah. Yeah, as we all know, it's 17, so I failed. No, I thought when many of the biggest challenges on earth that we have today, if it's child abuse or if it's healthcare, education, one of the few ways to actually see that is eradicated is, of course, using technology. So I advocating for having one goal that would be mobility, broadband, and cloud, which is basically 21st century's infrastructure, that every country should see that they have that technology in order to reach their citizens and be able to give remote healthcare, remote education, etc. So that was the reason behind it. Today, of course, you can say that all 17 goals have digitalization inside them. And I think when we're seeing this extremely tough situation with the pandemic right now, as well as the economical downturn, we have finally taken the leapfrog, actually start using these digital tools. And that should be to benefit for many of the most vulnerable in our society. But it can also be the biggest challenge if they don't get access, if they don't get broadband, if they don't get the digital content that that is supporting their needs, that it's even going to create a bigger vulnerability in our society and even bigger gaps. So that's what I was advocating for, and I'm still working quite a lot with that daily here in the US.
But very concretely, what difference would it have made if we had got this 18th goal?
I think that what we see right now, out of the 193 countries being part of the UN, it's only 130 of them that has a broadband plan, that has a plan to really roll that out. I think if it had been gold, we have been following up that much more cautiously, and we would have every country in the world that signed up for the SDGs that actually would have a broadband plan to see that all their citizens would have access to broadband. But not only that, because sometimes it's equally important if you have the broadband, that's just a platform, but also that you have digital content, like for education, for healthcare, for social information, to see that it doesn't matter where you're born or where you are, you should have the equal opportunity. So that would have made a difference. I think that many countries actually have taken that very serious and are implementing it quite vehemently when it comes to these plans. And Sweden is one of them in the forefront, and in every sort of benchmark, Sweden is coming out very highly when it comes to broadband penetration and seeing that citizens are connected. So I think that would have made a difference. I think now people and countries are realizing it's of essence. It's so vital, because we've seen this in this pandemic and this economic downturn. If you're not digitally connected, you're actually outside all support and all possibilities to be part of our society.
What was the resistance? Why didn't you come all the way through?
I think it was so many other goals. I think they needed to decide how many goals they can have for all these countries and have it have a consensus around the 193 countries. I think that was the main thing.
And you will still fight for it, or?
I fight it all the time, and I think that what we're seeing right now at the US, at the World Economic Forum, in the UN, we see clearly much more work around digitalization as a mean to bridge the gap, because we need to understand that if we had the gap to reach the goal 2030 for 1 year ago, that has increased. Given that we have the pandemic and economic downturn, we actually need to do even more to reach those targets. And one of the few means is digitalization.
Hans, we have heard here how when a child has been exploited, the pictures will always be out there. I mean, they can be taken down, but they pop up somewhere else. And the child, coming adult, has to live with the knowledge that it might come out these pictures when she enters college, or when she has her first interview trying to get a job, or getting married, or whatever. And there is a constant fear because the images are there. And I mean, the most efficient way is to stop them at the source when they are taken, when they are produced. But if that's not possible, as an old tech guy, what kind of technology would be needed in order to stop these pictures for good when they have entered internet?
The internet is a very broad set of technologies with service all around the world. So of course it's a really tough task, and as you said, to stop them at the source is absolutely the best, so they can never get out again, and that they are deleted. But if that's not possible, I think that systems like the photo DNA or like Netclean are the best ones you can have in the systems in order to detect and take them away immediately, and do it automatically, not having sort of manual detection, because there's too much. And that's why we need this type of technologies, and they need to fortify. And I think with AI and all the new technologies, we're going to be even better to detect these things and being able to take them away much quicker from the net.
But that's amazing how it's not possible to take them away much quicker. Is it hard to define what is a pornographic child picture, or what is the problem? I mean, what I hear, you can take down terrorist pictures. I was with IS, for example, quite quickly. You can detect them. Why don't you find these pictures or take them down?
No, I think it's the same with. I think the same with the terrorist or with child. I think the same. You need manual work to do it, and that's basically from the social network social network companies to doing that, and they would have tens of thousands of people only doing that manually in order to find it, because ultimately you need to see them. If the photo has not ever been up before, you need to do that. But as said, I believe that AI over time will be able to be so intelligent so they can actually detect it as it comes up, and I'm sure that the Googles of the world and the Facebooks of the world are working with that constantly.
And when do you think it comes?
I cannot say, because it's more them that is working with that than us at this moment, as they have user-defined content coming up to the platforms all the time, and that's very important to see that that's avoided. And there are many other platforms as well, of course, that are more obscure that you cannot find. But ultimately, it's all about having these technologies out. But remember, no one owns the internet. It's a conglomerate of over hundreds of thousands of servers that are connected. And that's one of the problems. But clearly, technology will advance. Unfortunately, the bad guys will advance as well. But our job is to advance quicker than the bad guys.
When the pictures are entering the dark web, I guess it's even harder to find them and to take them down. Or is it the same kind of principle, the same kind of technology, and the same kind of search?
It's basically the same type. It's just that it's a little bit harder to get in there. But in general, it's the same type of search and the same type of things.
Hans Westberry, Verizon, thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.
So, we will stay in the US, and now we will meet Michael Keller, who is an investigative reporter at New York Times. And they launched a news story, extensive one, in February on sexual child abuse, child sexual abuse. And the headline, or the beginning, was like this, I quote, 20 years ago, the online images were a problem. 10 years ago, an epidemic. Now the crisis is at a breaking point. What went wrong? So, Michael, welcome to our seminar. There you are.
Thank you for having me.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm beginning. I'm quoting the beginning of this extensive story. How were the reactions when you published it?
They were quite interesting. The reactions from readers were mostly that the topic was incredibly disturbing, which I think was what we wanted to portray accurately. I think coming into this field and reading some of how it's often discussed or people think about it, there were a lot of euphemisms. People don't quite understand the level of horribleness that happens and what is depicted. I think, language like, was sexually assaulted or abused doesn't quite get at some of what investigators and people that are trying to solve this problem really see every day. One thing that was particularly shocking to me was we heard when we were talking with the FBI that while they investigate every tip that comes in where it seems like a child could be in imminent danger, they do have to do a certain level of triage from some of the tips they get from the National Center. And they really prioritize the ones where the abuse involves infants and toddlers, which really just was beyond shocking to me that was not only that type of abuse was happening, but that it was happening in such a large volume. So we got a lot of reactions from readers that this was something they didn't know about. They didn't know about the extent of it, which, as a journalist, certainly you try and educate people about new things. In the legislative world, there have been some reactions to it. There were so far about 3 proposals in the US to try and solve some of the problems, some of which we identified, including increasing the amount of time that technology companies are required to hold on to the material that they find. We found that sometimes by the time law enforcement gets notified, they go back to the company to try and get more information, and they say, well, we don't have it anymore. So a proposal would double that period from 90 to 180 days. There have been some more controversial proposals to limit the immunity that technology companies currently have over certain types of user-generated content, in this case, child exploitation content, and other proposals to dramatically increase the funding that US law enforcement would get to try and look into this. One of the issues that we found was that while Congress is authorized to spend a certain amount of money every year to dedicated law enforcement groups looking at this crime, that funding has really been stagnant over the last 10 years. And as you pointed out, how we introduced our first article, the problem has really increased dramatically.
That's one of your findings. We'll come back to your main findings, but first, what sparked your interest? How did you start this entire very extensive journalistic job?
Yeah, it started all from an anonymous tip. Tipster wrote into us saying that they were searching on Microsoft's Bing search engine for a very specific weight of bullet. And instead of getting images of bullets, they were getting back explicit images of children, which to them was, I think to anyone, would be extremely disturbing. So because I work on the investigations team at the New York Times looking at technology issues, this tip came to me. We followed kind of the keywords that the tipster wrote in saying they used. And sure enough, we didn't get back bullets, but images of children, and also suggested terms that the search engine returned to us that also had nothing to do with bullets.
And this was a very respectable and normal search engine. It was Microsoft's, right?
Right. And I think what's surprising when you come across something like this is you hear stories of people, who download a movie on BitTorrent and the next day they get their internet service shut off. And so the question for us was, well, how does something like this just appear on the open web? And I think you read stories about, well, this is on the dark web. This was just so easily accessible that it really made us wonder, well, how is this possible? One tricky thing as journalists is that in the United States, there's no legal protection or safe harbor for viewing these images, or any do-gooder that wants to go out and try and find it and report it. So we contacted our lawyer who told us that, and then immediately forwarded the tip to the FBI and got in touch with them. But it really started us down this road of, well, this is very strange and very disturbing. How do we look into this more? And one of the first things we learned was just that the numbers had really dramatically increased over the last 10 years. And it just led to this question of, well, how did we get here?
But FBI didn't want you to, or actually told you that it could be a crime for you to continue the investigation. Did you get my question?
The last part dropped off, but I think it was probably how did we then investigate that?
I think that FBI advised you not to continue the investigation because you could then be treated as a criminal.
Yeah, so they didn't use those words exactly. I mean, I think they just said, we remind you that you don't have any legal protections if you view these images. But it did make us think really hard about, okay, this seems like a really important story. How do we go about it in a way that's both, not just legal, but also ethical? Because I think one of the big issues that we heard is that just viewing the images is an act of re-victimization, and we didn't want to provide any harm in, even with good intentions. So we learned about Microsoft's photo DNA. We also learned that they allow you to sign up for that service. So we filled out an application, said we were the New York Times and journalists. And about a month and a half later, we got approved. And that opened up some interesting possibilities for us. So because I work on the technology investigations team, I have a bit of a background in computer programming. So I was able to write a computer script that would essentially replicate what the tipster did, kind of search the internet on, both on Bing and other search engines with those keyword terms. But very importantly, the script wouldn't show any type of graphical interface. And also it would block any request for image data. So not only would we not be seeing anything that was happening on kind of a computer level, there was actually no image data even coming to our servers. So we felt that was kind of an ethical and legal balance, or, did it in a good way. And so what we were able to do then is, even though there are no actual images, you could still get the URL that appeared on the search result page. We then took that URL and sent it to Microsoft's PhotoDNA service, and searching on Bing and others, we actually found matches, which was very surprising to us. We had this kind of fundamental question at the heart of the reporting, which is, what the tipster saw, was that actually illegal? Certainly there's different definitions. Not every picture of a naked child is illegal. And so this was, it confirmed that yes, there were actually illegal images on the open web, and a surprising finding that even using Microsoft's own PhotoDNA service on their own search engine, it found matches. We contacted Microsoft and they said that it was a bug and a mistake and that they'd fixed it. One technique that we often employ as investigative journalists is you do it again. And we found more after that. And so it did seem like there were, and it wasn't just Microsoft. I think there were, we started reading court cases and found that this was a problem across many different platforms. You have offenders who would go on to Facebook groups and ask people, how can I start getting these images? And they say, well, you should download Kick Messenger to start talking to kids, and then download Dropbox, and that's how you can start sharing them. And so we found that there was definitely pervasive across the industry, and I can talk about this a little bit more, but the tools that existed, like PhotoDNA, didn't seem to be fully implemented to the degree that we would have expected.
Okay. So your main findings then, if you try to conclude them, because there were quite a few. One main finding, if we start, Michael, if we start with the main finding in the institutions, in the police force, FBI, and the Justice Department, that part, what did you find there?
Yeah. We found that about 10 years ago, the government and law enforcement knew that this was a growing problem, that there was one law enforcement officer who testified before Congress who said at the time, it's around 2007, 2008, that they were underfunded, overwhelmed, and drowning in a tidal wave of tragedy. And this was a person who was monitoring peer-to-peer networks. They could see possible offenders trading this material, but they didn't have the resources to go after them. Congress did react. They passed a bill, a landmark bill at the time, that did essentially three main things. It authorized a certain level of funding that the Congress could spend each year. Two, it required the Justice Department to really study the problem and issue new strategy reports every 2 years. And three, it put someone in charge of all of that at the Justice Department. And our reporting found that none of these three really lived up to what the lawmakers had expected. While there is a certain level of funding that gets approved each year, it's been pretty flat for the last 10 years and has not really kept pace with the scope of the problem, which has really grown exponentially. Two, the Justice Department, those reports they were supposed to put out every 2 years, there's only been 2 done so far. The last one was in 2016, and we did kind of a close reading of it. And it was missing many of the kind of key provisions that were required to be included by law. And third, the person in charge of the whole national response, that position does exist, but it's never been really given the full authority that it was supposed to. And so when you don't have a good understanding of the scope and the strategy, and you don't have someone really vested with enough power to really raise those alarm bells, a lot of people told us that's how you get into the position that we're in, where the problem now 10 years later has grown even bigger, and we still don't have a great handle on how to solve it.
How come? How come that it's possible that it's? What do you think is the explanation?
We spoke with the first person that held that national coordinator position, and she told us that it just was never a priority among the top officials at the Justice Department, that other issues like terrorism often took the spotlight. In our reporting, we found that there's a very advanced cybercrime center at Homeland Security Investigations. But part of their funding, a good chunk of their funding was withheld until the last month of the fiscal year after we started asking questions about it. and it was diverted to immigration enforcement. So it seemed like there was a pattern where just other law enforcement priorities took precedence.
You have other main findings. Could you tell us about one more?
Yeah, so on the technology side, I mentioned how it seemed like photo-DNA wasn't fully implemented in terms of the search engines. We found that other kind of policy questions like when images are scanned was inconsistent across different technology companies. For instance, on many file sharing platforms, the files were only scanned once a file was shared, which certainly isn't very comprehensive, and so would lead to court cases that we would read where law enforcement would get a tip about 2 images, they would go in with a search warrant and then find thousands or tens of thousands more, and that had been shared over the course of years. So it was really, we were just having very little visibility in some sense into what was actually on the networks. Video, I think, was also one of the big takeaways that we found, that while there is a standard for images, there really isn't a standard format for video. Photo-DNA for video exists, but different companies use different ones, and kind of limits how much you can share. And what one company finds may not then be findable by another one because there isn't kind of a shared resource or shared language. And people said that was a hindrance. And other companies such as Amazon Web Services or other kind of enterprise cloud platforms don't scan at all. So that was certainly, there are just big blind spots in the industry.
Michael, this might be a personal question, but how have your view of society changed after this investigation you did?
That's a good question. I think it certainly was much darker than we ever thought it would be. But I think we also met a lot of people who have dedicated their lives to this topic. We spent about a year on this investigation. We spoke with people in law enforcement, child advocates, and certainly we spoke with victims and survivors themselves who are dealing with this personally, but also trying to help other people. So that was also extremely positive, that you have people that, despite how horrific it is, have said, this is what I want to do with my life and try and make the world better. So that was also a good counterbalance.
And finally then, when you presented this idea to the editors of New York Times, were you welcomed, or were they kind of hesitant? It's too complicated, it's too nasty, people don't want to read about it?
No, I think that was really what was amazing, is we had a very high level of support all the way to the top, and that they recognized that this was a hugely important story that wasn't being told. And I think we did 4 Sunday front page stories about it, which certainly in this news climate is hard to do. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of important things going on in the world. It was really a whole team that also was dedicated to, how do we not just tell the story and get the facts out, but tell it in a way that really engages people and explains it, tells it emotionally. And we were fortunate to have parents of children that had been abused, as well as 2 women who were abused as children, who were agreed to be photographed. And I think telling it with that human side, even though it is something that is illegal, to show the abuse itself, and but being able to find ways to humanize it, I think really was key for us, and hopefully that came across. I think from readers' reactions, that was one of their takeaways.
Michael, you really, you succeeded. This story has made it all its way through all the way to Sweden, to Stockholm, and we pick it up and we interview you, and we are happy to do so. Thank you so much for participating in this event.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Så, det här var alltså en story som gick på under ganska många dagar och ganska många veckor. Sorry. I'm back in Stockholm here. English is everybody telling me. Why do you speak Swedish? And that's a good language, but it's a small one. So this was a story that was published in New York Times during many days. I mean, it was a follow-up more and more and more. So, and it really made a great impact. So back to our panel. Linda, what kind of importance does media have?
Very much. A very big importance, of course, of awareness raising, that what we are talking about today is kind of a silent problem in one way. People don't want to hear, and as we heard here, that this is a sensitive topic. They're very nasty pictures, as you put it, and so on. That is connected to silence, and the silence is always the worst perpetrator towards the children, because that doesn't open up for a forum where they can tell about what happened to them. So here media is of course extremely important. They work fast compared to research that is very slow. So media is very good in that way, and also that they have a big spread, of course. They reach a lot of people. So it's very important.
And it's also a way, I guess, to show to the child, this is not normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have already from the Me Too, hashtag Me Too and so on. I mean, that's so good examples on how we make a stage for people to actually tell their story.
And for you newcomers, Linda Johnson is a researcher. She's a PhD of child psychiatry, also a lecturer, and she made a very important contribution when Sweden 2 years ago adopted a new law that equalizes the digital rapist to the physical one. And that was your research actually helping to, I mean, it played a major part in it. Why is it so important to equalize a digital rapist who is actually not physically in the room to the physical one?
And this is, I mean, I have a whole research group, so we're doing this kind of research. And what we see from the results is that these children show as much symptoms related to traumatic experiences, like PTSD and so on, as penetrative sexual abuse offline. And when we get that result, we thought, okay, we got to do something about this. And then, of course, also, we hear from clinicians who meet the offended children that their psychological health is really bad. And that's when we started to look into the jurisdiction. And when, of course, we get all these court cases that we read about and so on. And then we noticed that it's not really a new law. It's just that you're expanding what could be considered as a rape. That this can actually be a virtual rape if it's really bad. So in the Swedish first court case, where a man was sentenced for rape, there were of course very severe types of online sexual abuse, that including other children, animals, things like that. But I also want to raise that we talk about, and in most jurisdictions we are very focused on penetration. But what we see from the psychiatric side is that actually there are so many other things that play a role in an abuse. For example, how threatened a child is, the fear, all the things that we've been talking about earlier today that actually affects the health. So it's not just, so you can't simplify it to just penetration.
And then the fact that there is a screen, that the offender actually is acting in front of a screen, it doesn't meet the child physically. Does that change his behavior compared to a more traditional rapist?
What we have noticed in the online sexual abuse, and it's a doctoral student to me, Malin Juleby, who has her results published on paper on court cases, Swedish court cases, where we can see the threats, explicit threats towards the children are so common, and we are not used to that in the same extent offline. And what can be the difference? Yes, because of the perpetrator there is a screen between the child and the perpetrator, so maybe they force the situation a bit longer, but also that there are so many children that they can reach. So if one child says, no, I don't want to do this, goodbye, then they have a whole arena with new children. So there are special circumstances around these cases.
Björn, short, were you surprised when you heard Michael Keller describe the lack of interest from Justice Department, all these infrastructure that actually was set up but didn't really work?
With the risk of being bullied by the Swedish government, maybe, no, I wasn't surprised. And I think it's due to the fact that still, after so many years, we tend to, or a lot of people tend to see this as images with illegal content. They don't see it as a physical abuse. There's like a wall between the picture and the physical abuse. So that's probably why it's down prioritized, and it's been for many years, not only in the United States but also over the years in Sweden. Nowadays, I can proudly say that Sweden has stepped up a lot, both from a societal point of view, but also from a law enforcement point of view, and we do really address these kind of the online sexual abuse against children quite extensively now, which is absolutely, I'm super happy for it because I'm working with this for 15 years. So yes.
So now the third person in the panel here, and again for you newcomers, is our host or our hostess, Anna Boyström, the CEO of Netclean. And please, Anna, you have a presentation that we would like to take part of.
Yes, I do, but I think it's a break first, so I think we need to stretch the legs.
We need to stretch our legs, that's right. We need a break now, don't we? So 10 minutes of break, and then we'll meet Anna Boyström. Netclean. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you.
Take my papers so it's not yours. There we go.
Okay. So I will present Netclean a bit for you. And first of all, thank you for a very nice 2 sets of conference. It's been very interesting. So what about Netclean? Netclean is a Swedish company, and we are focusing on finding child sexual abuse material at the workplace with the aim to safeguard children. We launched our first product to the market back in 2005, and today we have installations in more than 110 countries. To safeguard children, both Netclean and our customers need to collaborate with law enforcement, and that has given us a unique opportunity to share insights from the police community with the private sector and the general public. We believe in knowledge sharing because we have to raise awareness about this topic, and we share knowledge that we have gained over the years through 2 platforms. One is the Brighthood Conference, and the other one is our yearly Netclean report that will be launched this year, end of November, beginning of December. It's hard to talk about child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, without mentioning COVID-19 and how the measures to curb COVID in countries and societies have resulted in putting more children at risk for sexual abuse and exploitation. Several large law enforcement agencies in the world, including the FBI, Europol, and Interpol, warned early that they saw an increase in activities on pedophiles' forums on Darknet. And in a recent report from September, Interpol states, with increased time being spent online by the general population and often in more private settings, than in the work environment, the illegal consumption of child sexual exploitation material has increased. When we detect child sexual abuse material at the workplace, we use different technologies in our products. We use blocking technology on mobile devices and detection technology on computers and servers. Our blocking technology for mobile devices uses a uniquely combined and continually updated blocking lists from some of the world leading sources, including Internet Watch Foundation. Our detection technology uses hashes or digital fingerprints in order to find child sexual abuse material handled with the computer. These hashes or digital fingerprints are pre-classified material from law enforcement agencies. And we also have different layers of detection in our detection engine in order to ensure performance. Our own Netclean detection algorithm is one layer, and the Microsoft PhotoDNA is on another layer. Our Netclean detection algorithm enables performance and allows speed, while as the PhotoDNA makes it possible for our solution to find images with slight alterations, such as resized images or change of file format. After listening to Susie that spoke about where the material is hosted, it can be interesting to learn when the material is consumed. Data collected from internet service providers across the world who use technology to block access to websites that are known to contain child sexual abuse material show that people search for this material 24/7. The highest rate of attempts to reach CSAM occurs on Sundays, after which the number starts to reducing, showing the lowest rate on Fridays. On Saturdays, you can all see that the numbers start to climb again. If you compare across 24 hours, the highest numbers of attempts to access child sexual abuse material on the internet occurs in the evenings and is at its lowest in the early morning, rising between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. And then you can see that between 10 a.m. and 9 p.m., the rate remains constant. Child sexual abuse material is consumed 24/7, 365, even during working hours. In the Netclean report, we surveyed a combined installed base from a variety of our customers that use Netclean Proactive to detect if the computers handles child sexual abuse material. In total, we surveyed 270,000 computers all over the world, and we found that 1 in 500 computers had been used to download, share, or view child sexual abuse material. In all cases where an alert was triggered, the individual responsible was male. The most frequent age of the men using the work computer to consume CSAM was between 30 to 50 years of age, but the age span ranges from 20 years up to pension age and include men with as well as without family. We wanted to learn more how and when these types of alarm occurs in the IT environment. So we looked at where the alarms occurs, and most alerts are triggered when the computer is away from the physical workplace and outside of working hours, during evenings, holidays, and work trips. And it's not uncommon for the individual to turn off the network connection in order to avoid detection. Some alerts occur during downtime in the workplace, for example, during lunch hours or early in the morning. In most cases, as Björn referred to earlier today, the alerts referred to just a few images that had been recognized by the software, often no more than 2 to 5 images. But our customers had also found alerts that involved 15 to 20 images. And in a few cases, an alert involved several thousand images, up to 20,000 images from one single individual. Also, as Björn said before, depending on businesses have different procedures when they find that an employee has consumed child sexual abuse material. Some conduct a thorough forensic investigation before reporting to the police, and others report the alerts to the police immediately without further investigating the computers. The businesses that have undertaken an investigation have in most cases found child sexual abuse, more child sexual abuse material. And businesses, they don't always have the information about what happens after the police have taken over an investigation. But in cases where there is knowledge about a house search and the outcome of a house search, more material has in most cases been found at the home of the perpetrator. I want to show you a real case from one of our customers. And in this real case example, the organization retrieved an alert that one of their employees had used a USB stick to access child sexual abuse material on his work computer. The alert contained 5 files with images that were classified as child sexual abuse material. The images were verified, and the police initiated an investigation. A house search at both the workplace and the individual's home was planned and executed. At the house search, the suspect computer and other devices were seized, including a mobile phone. When the police examined the content of the mobile phone, they found newly produced material, images and videos, depicting the sexual abuse of 2 young children living with the suspect, his partner's 2 children. Further investigation revealed that the suspect was acting in collaboration with another man, who directed the sexual abuse of the children, which was live-streamed to him via Skype. As a result of the detection, police investigation and legal process, the 2 men were sentenced to jail and children were safeguarded. By following a trail of a detected image, more material can be found, perpetrator can be prosecuted, and children can be rescued. But this requires 2 things. One thing is collaboration, and the other thing is a will to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I mean, what really surprised me was when you said that 1 out of 500 computers are found to contain this kind of material. It's a lot.
Yeah, we were actually surprised ourselves. Yeah. It is a lot.
Now we will talk to a partner of yours.
Yeah.
And that's Netclean. I mean, the whole business model is to partner with big software companies. And now we will talk to Mr. Sanjay Poonen, the COO of VMware. And Mr. Poonen, you're with us from California, aren't you?
Thank you very much for having me at your conference. Yeah, I am here in California. It's early in the morning.
Thank you for joining us. Please, just so we understand, I mean, you are a partner of Netclean, but we will also want to know exactly what is VMware. It's a global company, it's a part of Dell, you're providing solutions in the cloud, but tell us a little bit so we understand exactly what VMware is working with.
Thank you for having me at your conference. It's a delight and a pleasure to be with you. VMware, we are the 6th largest software company in the world. We're about 11 billion in revenue. Our core proposition is cloud infrastructure. We invented this notion of a virtual machine that is really the operating system of data centers. It helps companies run their data centers efficiently, save energy, save costs. And we've been doing that for 20 years and have 500,000 customers. And then we also have a user and a security part of our business where we protect people's devices, we secure those devices, and that's the connection for our partnership with Netclean. We have a very vibrant ecosystem. We work with many of the largest companies in the world, including cloud infrastructure companies like Amazon and big hardware companies like Dell. But then we also like partnering with innovative, newer companies like Netclean.
Okay. VMware security strategy is all about keeping applications and data secure from hackers and theft. How can this strategy be applied to the problems that we're facing with child safety?
Yeah, I think, when Hans Vestberg, CEO now of Verizon, he's a good friend of mine, first told me about Anna and Netclean, I was very intrigued by the proposition. I'm a personal, and my wife and I are, personally support many causes like this from a charitable perspective, like the International Justice Mission, things that are focused on child safety. I like the way in which Netclean even called it child abuse, child exploitation. So the cause was near and dear to my heart, first off. So I think the nature of what Netclean was trying to solve. But then we asked ourselves as a company, beyond my own personal passion for areas like this, we have technology on people's devices, laptop, tablets, and phones that manage and secure that. Workspace ONE and Carbon Black. How could we build integration jointly on our side and also with Netclean? Because the value proposition of VMware is to have an ecosystem of partners that build on our platform. So we've been working between our mutual teams by which the technology that we use to protect the laptops can have deep integration with Netclean, so we can not just protect the devices from these known types of malware and things that we see in often devices that could come at them, and these are threats like Petya and things that we saw in the past, but also these newer type of threats where users might be trying to do malicious things like store images, store files of child abuse.
How do you estimate the willingness among your customers to pay for this kind of IT protection? It's an extra cost.
I think that, I think customers realize there's obviously security is a boardroom topic today because people want to keep their places safe. They've seen the impact of some of these deep threats, whether it's from bad people who are criminals who are trying to attack, whether it's an accidental problem, or whether it's nation state. These are very, very big. And if there's one thing that's growing even faster and bigger than the security industry, where there's investment from small and big companies, it's the bad guys. They're actually growing. So what we found is there's willingness. The chief security officer of companies have budgets. They're often one of the biggest parts of IT budgets. And banks, telecom and media, public sector, healthcare, hospitals, they've seen attacks. In many cases, many big companies in their industry have been attacked. So there's a willingness to invest in security. That's one. And then as we think about the nature of what the security threat is, the surface area has now grown, because in the past it may have been just laptops, but now you have mobile devices. In the past it may have been just a data center, but now you have the cloud. So mobile and cloud and operational systems, we've even seen threats coming in from air conditioning systems. So anything that's on the internet now has the possibility of being a potential for a threat. And just listening to Anna just now in terms of the ways in which people are looking for more and more sophisticated ways, to create security. And this particular form of security is often intentional, malicious, and by people who fundamentally don't understand, what it means to abuse children. So that's a crime in, I think, almost every country in the world. And it's important for us as, folks in the corporate world to not just think about our customers and our employees, but also think about the community and how do we keep the community safe. I do think that it's important that companies have a greater good than just looking at profits. The greater good is keeping the community safe. And this is an example. Netclean is a great example of a company that's doing that.
We're in the midst of an epidemic, and there is a connection between COVID, people staying at home, the schools are closed at many places, and so on, and between this child sexual abuse. And you as a company, you have just launched a new tag, era of remote work, I think it is, and you are really now searching for what takes it to have all these centers of these offices, thousands of them all of a sudden when people work from home. You have been investing new leadership and organizations and so on. Could you tell us a little bit, what do you see will stay on after COVID time?
Yeah, here we are, right? I'm able to talk to you in Scandinavia here. Thank God for technology like Zoom. Welcome to my makeshift living room, so to speak, so we could talk, and it's almost real time in terms of communication, and the video quality is pretty good. I think the last time we went through a crisis like this was 2008. I was working at SAP at the time, and we were all huddled in these small rooms around this very expensive equipment, telepresence, to try and have high fidelity. And then when we first saw this company, Zoom, I know the CEO of Zoom. I thought this was incredible because they were bringing that power telepresence type technology to a mobile phone. And here we are, we're able to have this type of conversation. So thank God for technology that allows us, even through this pandemic, to have collaboration. But I think the future of work is forever changed, because going forward, I don't think that every person, even when we come back, will be comfortable coming back to work for a long time. And some people, if they're going through sickness, should also not come to work when they're sick. They should be allowed to heal and be able to heal nicely from home, but not sometimes miss work. So I think certain things will change. For example, we have instituted a policy now where every meeting has a mandatory Zoom requirement. Why? If someone's sick, they should be able to work from home, but not have any prejudice where they can't participate in the meeting. Communication now becomes a lot more intimate in country zones. We've started doing more 25, 30-minute calls for many of my teams in the country, once a month. In the past, I might go to Japan once or twice a year. I might go to France or Europe, 2 or 3 times a year. Now I could be in almost every country once a month in their time zone. It doesn't mean that when the pandemic ends, I won't travel. The way in which we collaborate in teams is also going to have to change, because some of these collaboration tools, while we may want to meet in person for the first phase of a design of a project, when it gets to the next phase, we'll have to work remotely, and we need collaboration tools within this type of Zoom environment. So I think at the beginning and the end of a project, we'll probably see people coming into the office, maybe in smaller percentages than 100%. In some countries, it might be 25, 40, 50%. But then we need to allow always for a distributed workforce. And how does VMware play into this? We want to make sure that as you're using your laptops and phones, any of those devices, in a distributed sense, it's secure and managed, and it's really simple to access applications. That's how we're kind of like that highway that allows the cars to operate really, really well and safely.
But this will affect entire society. I'm thinking of public transportation, I'm thinking of estate market and prices of office buildings and so on. This is part of your strategy, I guess. You have been into all this. Could you elaborate a little bit about what's happening apart from security at home and apart from people not going to the office? Society-wise, this will make a new structure.
Yeah, I think there's profound impacts on society. And we have to think about not just the physical health of our employees, but also the mental health. I'm deeply concerned that the more people are just sitting at home on these, endless Zoom calls, they're going to have Zoom fatigue. I call this Zoom butt because I'm sitting on all the time on video conference. That's not healthy, certainly for adults, but it's also not healthy for our children to be educated through these types of modes. We were made to have students in classrooms, so I'm hoping schools can open safely in all the different parts of the world. But we have to think about the broader societal implications. And how do we ensure that our society is both, able to function productively and safe? I think there's a part of the economy, almost every country except for a few are still in negative GDP growth. And I think technology and digital technology and the IT industry has to be the ones that help lead. I don't know that this pandemic will last 6 years like World War II did, but let's just say it's 6, 12, 18 months since we have therapeutics and the vaccine. And when we see a recovery in the economy, I think it's incumbent on digital technology to be that agent of change, but also to do it in a way that embraces society. And I think the greater good of VMware, this is where we feel we are one company among many others that owe it not just to be a profitable, high growth company, one of the greatest IT companies, but also to be a force for good. And the more you can think about all of your stakeholders, certainly your stakeholders are your employees and your customers, but your stakeholders are also your communities and the public in general. Exactly. When you can serve those communities, you actually become a better company, not just for your employees, but for all of society.
Thank you so much, Sanjay Poonen, for taking part in this conference early in the morning from your side, and with this very good conclusion that you presented to us here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me in your conference, and all the very best. Stay safe and be well.
Best to you. So, now we will meet a legendary special agent, Jim Cole, Supervisor Special Agent. And he has been working with child sexual abuse for many, many years. He's an icon in many ways. And Jim, are you there?
I'm here.
You're there.
Good afternoon, Eva.
How does it feel to be presented as an icon?
I think it's the first time.
Well,
hopefully it lives up to the hype.
That's good. Okay, you have prepared a presentation for us, so please start.
Okay. You see that okay?
Yes, we do.
So in 2004, my life and my career were irrevocably changed when, as a special agent with Homeland Security Investigations, working in Portland, Oregon, I received a case from Canadian colleagues who had been working on a set of child exploitation videos that had become, unfortunately, encountered by law enforcement globally on numerous occasions, and was unfortunately gaining quite a lot of popularity amongst offenders online. And when that set of imagery or videos came into us, our Canadian colleagues thought that it might have been produced in our area in the Pacific Northwest due to some clues that they saw in the background of videos that pointed to a restaurant chain and a department store chain. And prior to this referral, I had worked many child sexual exploitation investigations with an online nature. That our focus as law enforcement was to arrest, identify and arrest these offenders, and then prove the crime and present that to a prosecutor for what happens after that, the judicial process. And in many of those cases, the nature of that would result in 5 years in prison. And it wasn't until this particular case where our colleagues in Canada had kind of looked behind that abuse, behind the image, into other factors, but not just to identify the offender, but to try to find and rescue that child victim. And it seems so obvious, but it was really a significant moment. And from that moment, it revolutionized the way that myself, and then later through the following years and events that occurred after that, how as an agency and even law enforcement in the United States approach these cases. And that led to what we term victim identification. And then further from that led to the establishment of an entity called Project Vic, that I'm one of the co-founders of. And through these two things, this process of victim identification and through Project Vic, we're now identifying and rescuing children, and it's become much more common and focused in the United States. Now, our global partners were doing this way ahead of us in the United States. As a matter of fact, many years ago, a Swedish investigator named Anders Persson is really the founding, we kind of call him the founding grandfather of victim identification, and really expanded that role when he was seconded to Interpol and the Crimes Against Children team. But for my own journey, that in the United States, it led us to establishing a victim identification program within HSI. And here you see one of the things that I kind of consider one of my legacies, this laboratory, but not just the laboratory, the people that work in it, because the people is really the important factor here. And yes, we utilize cutting edge technology, and we work and collaborate with companies, and it's incredibly important, as Anna just described, that collaboration between us. But the people is what make this all work. The technology alone needs the people behind it, both from the users, but from the creators and developers, but also the research and the development that goes into these tools are all critically important. And so what I want to do a little bit is talk about a case, but then really delve into the people that are behind this. Right now, law enforcement is under intense scrutiny, but I want those corporations and the industry that we work with to see the heart of the people that are behind when a lead gets referred to them. So in this particular case that came into our lab, we had horrific child sexual exploitation, child abuse of this really young child. And along with the abusive material, the offender also shared some non-abuse material. He was fairly careful not to expose her face. And in the abuse material, he had gone to great lengths to ensure that there were no clues, that there was very little to go on. The lead came through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And once it went through them and came to us, and they had done some really interesting things. They had sought out an expert in flora and fauna. And so the image was sanitized. And this was sent over to an expert with plant life and such. And using his tools, he was able to determine that the plant life that you see in that image can only grow in the southeastern United States in this area of grain, which really narrowed down. I mean, when we're talking about the whole United States, it's massive. And able to narrow this down to just a few states in a specific region was huge. But obviously, there's much more work to be done. And so one of my victim identification specialists started working on this and looked at some of these other images. And here's the image of a child and another child at a playground. And so he started doggedly contacting playground manufacturers and associations and cities and to try to find out, is there any way to figure out where this particular playground might be? And after much just really significant effort, hours on the phone trying to get to the right person, he gets to somebody who thinks that they can help. And from that, actually puts him in touch with the manufacturer of this playground. And from that, going through records, they determined that this particular setup that we see in this picture and one other was an installation that occurred in one place. It was unique. And so that, as you see in the red circle here, was in the Houston, Texas area. And so from there, figuring out where that playground was in the center of this community really leads to the identification of that offender, but more importantly, the identification and safeguarding of that child. And so from that, the investigators then start looking and making sure that, yes, this is the same playground, and the Google imagery matched up. And then from other imagery, started actually flying that neighborhood in Google Earth and looking at areas. And here in the previous image, you see there was a basketball hoop in the garage, and looking, and unfortunately there were several houses like that. But one of the images from Google Earth actually depicted these two houses, but off to the right, it actually depicted an extremely important clue. And that clue turns out to be this mound that you see in the background, this little rise of dirt. And through images where the child is playing on this mound of dirt, and then actually looking at the individual trees that are in that area and matching those trees up with the big tree, what I often say in these presentations, big tree, little tree, little tree, big tree, and confirming that that was the location, and then dispatching agents in Texas to that residence, that area, and determining where she was. And it was a significant moment. And my analyst who did this work, I asked him to jot down some words about this. And I usually hate to read slides, but I am going to do that for a moment. So he says, I will never forget the adrenaline and overwhelming rush of emotions that I experienced when I found a giant missing piece of the puzzle. I spent so much time working through all the material, asking myself so many questions. I was really frustrated at times while working this particular case. I saw the great lengths this person went through to protect their identity, and it was driving me crazy that I couldn't figure it out. But I kept going. I kept approaching the clues from multiple angles and doing whatever I could think of. Then, in an instant, we finally reached the right person with the right information and asked the right questions. We had suddenly narrowed down the potential location from the entire southeast region of the country to a specific neighborhood. It was incredible. Now, I keep the foliage map I had to start with as a reminder to myself of the possibilities of perseverance. This was his first rescue. And this analyst has now gone on to rescue so many more kids. And here's a picture of my team at the time. I've moved on now to a different role, but in our lab, and just the people behind these cases, and a small segment. Worldwide, there are approximately 75 law enforcement specialists who do this specific type of work, this victim identification. It is an incredibly small number of people who specifically devote their time to doing victim identification. Another story that I received from a Belgian colleague and friend. So you want a story? This is mine. I wish I could say I remember the first victim I was part of identifying. That's actually true, but I also remember the last, and all those in between. Any image of a victim, whatever image it is, stays in there, in the head, as well as those I worked on but never found the victim. Any picture represents a kid that maybe, yes, you saved in the end, but people like us are always too late, always. Truth is, though, it only takes one picture to make sure we're not too late again. Again, the first big case, a quite normal image, a young boy, naked, though playful in the garden next to an outdoor table, covered in the lunch or breakfast leftovers and a garbage can in the back. Those kinds of pictures, to people like us, a treasure chest. The lunch leftover packages and the garbage can lead to Belgium. And a snapshot from one of the videos gave us a possible mark of a car. And then it was a matter of finding all those car owners in Belgium. Easy peasy, not so much. But the picture and the snapshot eventually lead us to the victim and the suspect. We cannot miss out on that picture, because truth of it all is that without that one picture, the abuse might still be going on. That time, we were on to eventually stop it. Monja Vanjerbeek from the Belgian National Police. From a Swedish colleague, behind every image, there's a child who needs to be found. There's a perpetrator who needs to be found. Tuesday morning, members of the team arrive to the office and coffee and tea is being sipped while we have small talks. Time for a meeting in the briefing room, and the topic is a series of images which haven't been seen before, and some details in the images point to Sweden. They are shown on a big screen, and everyone goes silent. Everyone is dealing with what they see in their own way, and everyone is fully concentrated. Someone's making a note. The feeling of determination to find the clues which leads to identifying the child and the perpetrator. The feeling of agony watching another image of child sexual abuse. The feeling of grief, because it's never just an image, but proof of a crime. The feeling of disgust and anger. watching images of sexual abuse of children. Filled with determination, the team takes on the different tasks to identify the victim. Some of them are following up on more or less obvious details, and others are thinking outside the box. As time passes and there's no breakthrough, the team suffers from frustration. The images don't reveal any clues. The intensive search for information about the nickname of the poster of the images didn't give any result. All effort made and investigative actions done, and still no result. All we have is a long list of potential victims, but no details to make any visual comparison for ID. New images are posted, and the realization that the abuse is ongoing makes it even harder. The feeling of frustration of not having the required tools, feeling of insufficiency when time is passing, the feeling of despair when you can't find the clue, the feeling of hope when you can. Then suddenly there's new information. The suspect has made a mistake. Hectic comparison work starts going through social media, trying to find a picture of the girl. Narrow it down to several candidates. Another picture of a 3-year-old girl. Is it the same girl? No, but perhaps the next one or the next one, and there she is. The feeling of euphoria when you find the child. The girl with the red curly hair, there's no doubt. The girl we have been looking for so long. We just found her on her father's social media. There's a big difference though. In this picture, she's smiling. The feeling of relief when you know the child is safeguarded. The feeling of sadness when you think of how the child will cope. The feeling of determination when you think of all the children waiting to be found. The feeling of gratitude, being part of ending the victimization of a child, and the feeling of determination to never stop trying to find what's behind every image. And this is that team. We have a saying, a few sayings actually. It takes a network to defeat a network. Collaboration is key, and sharing is caring. And that's for all of us. That's all of us in law enforcement, in industry, in our non-governmental organizations and nonprofits. It's important that we keep this at the forefront, because none of those cases that you just heard about were an individual agency. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes, and companies like Netclean and the other companies in the Safer Society Group umbrella and the different NGOs and the different industry that we work with is incredibly important. This here is, I'm going to show some photos of these collaborations occurring. This is an outstanding initiative through Interpol called DevOps, which is really hackathons with internet service providers, other companies, developing tools and technology and artificial intelligence aimed at this problem. Other folks are partners at Camera Forensics, another DevOps, my friends and colleagues at Europol, and our friends and colleagues in Safer Society Group. Our really important partners in this fight, and this is just a small list, there's so many more. So the challenge now is, how do we work closer? How do we stop the abuse? It's a daunting, daunting question, and it's a difficult challenge. But only by collaboration, working together, and ensuring that those people that you just heard about have the right tools to do that job, to hopefully reduce that frustration and increase the hope and the joy, is what will make the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimko. It was incredible to hear the stories about the playground and Belgium and how you managed to find the offender, at last. Tell me, this is a very time-consuming way of investigating, but now you have also the tool of artificial intelligence. How has that changed your work?
So there's been a revolution in artificial intelligence just over the past several years. And we're starting to really see promise in those algorithms and tools. They're not quite there yet to rely on them in whole. You still need that human in the loop to verify, as some of previous presenters like Hans talked about. But I think that in this revolution, the technology will only continue to get better. And through these collaborations and partnerships and hackathons and initiatives, it's just a matter of time before we can at least reduce the need for that human in the loop to such an extent that we can start to do things in more real, near real time. And that's really where we'd like to see. I mean, I think that when we're chasing the creation of imagery that then gets posted online, we're already behind the curve, and that's where we've been, and we're constantly in law enforcement working to catch up. So it's that proverbial cat and mouse game. With the AI and kind of the ideas that are coming from our partners, and I can't take credit for this idea, but from an important partner that's very passionate about this work, you know, he posed to me the question, he said, why can't we stop, like in our camera devices that we all carry around in our pockets, which is where the majority of this material comes from, or in our digital devices, which, you know, they're digital devices. So we can actually potentially intervene at the creation of an image. What if AI could tell us that this is a sexually inappropriate image of a child and not actually even take the image or allow the image to be taken? That's one start.
Then you
what if our ESPs and ISPs had filtering capability when images are introduced in their network that would prevent that material from ever being uploaded?
Then you could stop it at the source. Please, James, stay on with us, because we have a very exclusive panel here, and I would like you to take part in the final discussion here. Is that possible for you?
Yes, thank you.
So, Björn and Jim, the question is to both of you. Jim presented here different teams, and he also talked about the euphoria when you finally find a victim, the victim and then the offender. I mean, not working with this, the first thought is, how do you for so many years stand working with all these terrible images and to find all these victims that are, you know, you're in a hurry all the time. How do you mentally support it? Should we start with Jim, as you were presenting all your teams there, and you were talking about the necessity of having good people staying on?
Yeah, so what I find is doing this work, it is incredibly difficult, but the folks that do this work and stay in this work for many years have an innate ability to be resilient. I personally, having worked prior to my career working online, child sexual abuse, I worked violent crime, homicides, and coming over and then working in the area of child sexual exploitation, I have found it to be both extremely difficult, but also extremely rewarding. And the reward outweighs the negatives. And I have, and a lot of the colleagues that we've mentioned and work with have a fairly innate ability to compartmentalize this, but we're also, just in the past several years, identified that we need to do a better job within law enforcement providing services and resources for our people to maintain that resiliency and not let these issues creep in and cause difficulties in our lives. And so we've set up peer support programs and mental health programs. We're much more keen to these issues, and also I think we've done not necessarily we're not done. There's more work to do, but we've removed a lot of the stigma that was behind saying, look, I need to talk to somebody, I need to get some of this off my chest, or I'm having difficulty.
Björn Sellberg, would you like to add?
No, it's like Tim saying. I met him many times, and and he touched upon this very, very important issue that you have to cooperate, collaborate. There is a fairly small community working with victim identification, which is super important that we maintain the people, we can maintain the community, share knowledge, share best practice. Being in that environment makes you feel comfortable, safe. It's kind of a family member kind of feeling. And it's like you say, Jim, the negative part of it, watching all these videos and films and the agony and despair of not being able to identify. But the feeling when you actually do, it's worth everything. And it's we had a case last week, and it's like you just want to embrace everybody and you want to applaud everybody. It's amazing. So it's worth everything. But you also need to have the understanding from the society and have the support from everybody. And so.
Linda Johnson, research, PhD. No, you are into child psychiatry. I'm trying to introduce people again here because people are newcomers and so on. But Linda, when they find a child, they find a victim, and that girl mostly gets to meet a professional or gets to talk about it, can she be helped?
Of course. I mean, we have to have the of course, we need to see the positive side of identifying and to be able to help this child out. But what is striking to me today, that we are talking about abusive images, and also for us who meet the children, or for those who are working with the children, that behind the picture there are so many different stories. We have been talking a lot about sexual abuse happening offline that are documented. We also have a lot of images that are self-produced, that could have been produced in consent between two young people, and abuse actually happens when the material is spread. And this is, of course, what we meet in psychiatry and also in social welfare offices, because when a child is identified, that's when our work starts. Then the social welfare services needs to get involved, make an assessment on the, for example, in this case with the girl, what is the family situation? Can she stay at home? Obviously not in this case, but and then also the screening for the health problem, possibly problems that the children have.
I guess that the images that are self-produced are even more, it's even more difficult to handle and to take care of the victim, because they are still victims, although they have produced the pictures themselves. I mean, because they have a part of the responsibility in one way or another. I guess it's harder to...
Yeah, but I mean, all these cases have special circumstances, so they are all severe in my eyes. But we should also know that these children are individuals, so they don't show symptoms. They might show symptoms when the police investigation starts, when they get to know that, oh, someone had actually found out. That's when things happen. When there are things happening in the family, oh, you can't stay with dad anymore, like in this case we heard, and so on. So I wouldn't like to say what is the most and the least severe. They are all severe in different ways, and we have to grasp everything here.
Very often, this is a question for all of you, very often this issue is considered to be a responsibility for the NGOs. It's not supposed to be something for a private traditional company, and that's an attitude you meet a lot, isn't it, Anna?
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, no one can own this problem, and everyone has to take responsibility for solutions. But I do feel that being a private company and providing solutions to the private company or private industry sometimes have hurdles, because we need to maintain an organization. We need to recruit top talent in order to provide the best possible efficient solutions for law enforcement and for the private sector. And we have to have a sustainable business model around our solution. But I kind of feel that sometimes in discussions and debate, it's like this kind of solution has to come for free or has to come for, no one wants to invest the money. And I really lack that conversation on the agenda, because I mean, law enforcement they need to have the right tools, the right education, the right people to do an efficient job, as well as the ISPs. They need to have the right infrastructure, right solution, right technology in order to stop the problem. And it costs money to develop, and someone has to pay for it. So yes, we need to have sustainable business model around what we are doing in order for it to maintain.
You'll soon get the final word because we're wrapping up. But before we do that, Linda and Björn, you have been around the entire day, the entire seminar. What is your takeaway?
My takeaway from today is that this is a global problem and that we need to collaborate, like most of us have talked about, and that there are so many levels and so many involved. Like private companies, there are, and from a psychiatric side, but law enforcement, I mean everything, and it's very big, and that means that we need a lot of funding to help each other out, to structure it better, to collaborate and help each other out, but also, as Anna said, that we need to structure in a smart way so we can work more efficient in this.
And Björn, what is your takeaway?
Well, I think the key word is collaboration. If we take away one part of this, there will be failure. We are dependent on the academia and the researchers to understand, okay, what is the issue here. We are dependent on the software development. Law enforcement cannot do anything about this since it's technical-driven issues. We need a financial sector to follow the money. We need proper legislation. We need law enforcement officers. We need a community. So the collaboration is key to everything. And my final word will be, if not we, who? If not now, when?
And Jim, would you like to give us a last takeaway?
I mean, I echo that. I mean, collaboration really is the key, and I would like to kind of issue a challenge to those providers out there. I think sometimes we get a little complacent and we think, well, we're doing this, so we're doing enough. And the reality is, child exploitation. Like we're all dealing with the pandemic right now, and this issue that's gripped media, and there are companies doing all kinds of things in relation to that. But child exploitation has been a pandemic for a long time. It's just been a little bit less notable to the general public, but it is absolutely a pandemic. And because we're seeing millions and millions of images and videos of child exploitation in circulation. And so I would like to challenge those companies to contact those law enforcement contacts that you're aware of and ask, what can you do? And when you're working on research and development for technology, what I have found is oftentimes companies are doing something aimed at a specific problem, not realizing that technology may have application in the child exploitation arena and what we're doing in a way that they would never have thought about. And some collaboration with us can bring that technology over. Photo DNA is a great example. Been around a long time, but Microsoft originally developed it. And when law enforcement came and said, hey, we can use that, Microsoft was like, no, we didn't develop it for that. We're doing something different with it. And today, it's one of our primary tools. So I think that's one of the big takeaways.
Anna, this was actually a call for action, and I think that's exactly what you would like us to. You would like to raise up in this fight against child sexual abuse. Please.
Definitely. I think I stand up over here. So just to finalize this conference, this was the first digital conference that we have ever arranged. And I'm so happy that it went well. This conference has been about SDG Goal 16.2 and abused exploitation against children. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are blueprints to achieve a better and more sustainable world for all. They address the global challenge we face. And as Linda said, we have learned today that child sexual abuse and exploitation is a global challenge. Today we have heard great and powerful speakers talking about solutions and what they are doing to achieve Goal 16.2 and to stop child sexual abuse and exploitation. But the digital era that we live in requires that we do more. There are thousands of children being abused and exploited for grown-ups' sexual gratification, and the connectivity, IT equipment and services that we are providing enable that crime to take place and to accelerate. I can sometimes feel, especially when talking to law enforcement agencies here and police officers, that the world is blind to the children who are being abused and exploited. These children have often no voice, and I would like to see them in their eyes one day and tell them that we hear them, we see them, and we will not accept this crime anymore. If there is a will, there is a way. I think Jim showed a great example on that when your colleagues are relentless trying to find victims depicted in the images. So if there is a will, there is a way, and I would like us all to make it possible for all children to grow up and thrive and become the best version of themselves as they can possibly be. As Daniel said earlier, the children are our fellow human beings. They are our future police officers, journalists, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and customers. They are our future, but they are also our now. I want to thank all the speakers and the panel today for sharing your time and experience with us today. I want to thank you, Eva, for brilliantly guiding us through this afternoon. And I want to thank all participants joining us at the Brighthood Conference 2020. I hope we will see you next year. Stay safe and take care. Thank you.